So, like I was saying, we only have one more week. We're in week 5. So the homework for last week, always connect first. So this is, you're going to hear me being a broken record. I'm going to talk about this again today, but we talked about this in the previous weeks, is that's kind of the most important first step for any of these lessons is really just, creating that stronger connection in order to get just everything working more smoothly. So whether that's cooperating, communicating, solving problems, setting limits, everything kind of starts with that connection. So last week, since we did talk about setting limits, creating expectations and guidelines for basically anything that you anticipate could be a problem. Any context that is an issue, if it's a problem going to the grocery store or you have problems, dropping off at school or whatever the situation is, making rules about that, making expectations about that together, if you're able to, with your child, if they have enough language and they're old enough, kind of creating, what you would expect from them, and then also allowing them to contribute too. Brainstorming ways that you can teach and show them what you want. Again, more than using words, teaching and showing them. Having them show you that they know the right way, and then acknowledging that they did it the right way. So making sure that whether that is, role-playing with toys, stuffed animals, or you're physically role-playing, and then, allowing them to show you that they do understand. When you do need to provide a consequence, providing that consequence immediately, so whether that's a timeout or whatever type of discipline you're using, you are providing that right after, the child exhibits, the behavior, the off-task behavior, so that they can associate the consequence with the behavior instead of providing it later. Sometimes that can be confusing. And consistently follow through. I know we talked about this again last week, but really making sure that you are providing that consequence instead of just threatening it. And sometimes that means, we had talked about in previous weeks, having, a heart-to-heart conversation with other adults that are providing consequences, because that can definitely mess with the consistency if you're having to all be on the same page. So for this week, in the packet that you received, checkup A is on page, in the packet, starts on page 32 at the bottom. So this week's lesson, it's a little bit quicker than other lessons, not terribly quicker, but I do want to give you a minute now, a couple minutes right now, to kind of fill this out right now. Usually we skip over these writing in parts, but I do want you to think about what was the last problem your child tried to solve. Kind of jot that down there. Whether or not you have this specific worksheet or you just have some paper in front of you, that's fine too. Just kind of think back. Was it today, yesterday? Maybe nothing sticks out in your mind, but you can remember this one time that, they had a meltdown about something. Just kind of write something down to remind yourself. What was the problem that they were trying to solve? And maybe sometimes problem solving in your child's eyes doesn't look like what it looks like for an adult. So, when you think about solving a problem, it can look very differently. So if you're having trouble thinking of something, thinking about the last time your child had a difficult time. So maybe their sibling took their toy away from them, or maybe they didn't want to get off the iPad. That's a problem. So you can just kind of write that down. It became a problem. So how did your child try to solve the problem? That answer could be a lot of different things. Did they try to compromise with their sibling? Did they use their words? Did they come and tell you? Say, sister took my toy from me. Did they hit their sibling? Did they have a meltdown? Did they have a tantrum? Just kind of write down what happened after the problem arose. And then number 3, were you comfortable with your child's approach, or would you have liked your child to work on the problem differently? If so, how? So again, if you wrote down, my child had a meltdown, they had a tantrum, I'm guessing that's not what you're wanting from them. So in that last question, just kind of thinking to yourself, how would I want them to handle this? Do I want them to come and tell me? Do I want them to work it out on their own? And then number 4, that's on page 33. If you helped your child work on the problem, what did you do? So, being really honest here, like if your child had a meltdown about the iPad, what was your reaction to that? Did they receive a consequence? Did you talk it over with them? After they received the consequence, did you have a conversation about maybe how that's going to happen again tomorrow? Or what were the parameters or the expectations that you have around, getting the iPad back after an hour of use or whatever your rule is? So just kind of recognizing what it is that you did. What was the outcome of that? And then finally, listing 3 words that describe your child's approach to solving problems. So some of the examples given there are energetic, careful, independent, maybe something like perfectionist. I know I've heard that from some friends where their child just needs to have everything just so, or, in order to solve the problem, the answer has to be very obvious. Like, it's hard for them to kind of think out of the box. Maybe that's true of your child too. Maybe, and if this is just not where your child's at right now, just writing down, I don't know, I haven't really seen him or her solve a problem effectively. And just kind of making yourself aware of that. And then listing words that describe your own approach to solving problems. So I know sometimes this can look really different. Maybe if, again, that example I just gave, if you have a child who's really an in-the-box thinker and it's hard for them to kind of venture out and they get very nervous about trying new things, and let's say you're the type of person who's just like, I'm going to try it and see if it works. You could really clash with your child's way of solving problems, and that could be, another layer of difficulty that you're having where you don't quite understand the way that they're approaching things. So then that last paragraph just asks, how do these lists match up? So thinking that over, having a discussion with your partner about that. Maybe you and your partner have very different ways of solving problems, and you've noticed that, maybe that's what's clashing with your child too. So real quickly, I wanted to show this kind of stages of development here. This is, I think, just a great visual, and if you're interested in more information on this, that reference there, Stanley Greenspan, he has a ton of work on social emotional stages of development and just social emotional learning in young kids. So if you Google his name, you will find a ton of stuff. Some of it is, some of it's really readable and I think easy to understand. Some of it's research, obviously, so that's kind of a different audience, but I think that that's a great thing to Google if you want to know more about these things. I'm just going to cover them like really, really briefly. So I just wanted to point out that when you're looking at this chart, problem solving is which number? It's number 4. So if you're looking at this as a progressive chart, that means that your child needs to have accomplished 1, 2, and 3 first. So I think really being honest and checking in with yourself and thinking, where is my child kind of on this continuum? So number 1, again, that we talk so much about is regulation. So basically what that means is calmness. Is my child in an emotional state of regulation? Are they able to think about solving this problem? If you're still there, then embrace it. Then that's where that's where your work is. If you know that my child becomes dysregulated, very easily, they're having tantrums, they're getting very emotional about transitions, or they're very emotional about whatever the situation is, that's where you need to start, instead of thinking, at the level of problem solving, because they simply can't do it in that if they're not regulated. So that's the beginning. Engagement and relatedness. So again, that's the connection piece. So do they feel connected to you? Do they feel engaged with another person who's able to kind of guide them through this process? So are they calm? Are they regulated? Are they engaged with another person, ideally you? Are they able to communicate? So kind of whatever that means. Maybe even if your child is younger, between 2 and 3, and they have minimal language, there's ways you can communicate with them visually. Can they communicate by drawing pictures? Is there some way that there's consistent communication there? Again, if your child's an infant and there's kind of no way of communication in terms of pictures or verbally, there's other ways you're communicating, they're not going to be able to solve problems. So it kind of makes sense. Like this is really, it's a developmental curricula or developmental stages here, and it really shows the different ages when children kind of learn these skills. So if your child has 1, 2, and 3, then awesome, you're ready to problem solve. I think if you realize you're still at one of those lower stages, which is totally fine, then that's where the work lies. So just kind of wanted to bring that up and kind of get you in that frame of mind. So the goal of this week's lesson, if your child is kind of there already, it really comes in 2 parts, which I think is great because they focus on first having your child calm down. So that's the first thing it says. Help your child learn to calm down so that he or she can think clearly and work out problems. So again, just like that previous slide shows of those different stages, your child needs to be regulated and engaged before there's any problem solving even possible. So they talk a little bit about the ways to kind of foster this calming. That could be a breathing exercise. It could be a counting sequence. Sometimes that works for some kids, some other type of sequence, whether that's saying ABCs or a special song you have. I think a special item that can kind of help a child to calm down if you know that they really love this certain stuffed animal or blanket or, chair they like to sit in the house. You know your child the best. So what is it that's going to take him or her to calm down? So that's step 1. Leaving the task for a few minutes, kind of taking a break, and then coming back and talking a little bit about it. So we'll go over the activity and parent tip cards in a few minutes. So when your child's upset or frustrated, suggest that he or she do a calming down activity before trying to problem solve. For example, let's calm down, making it a positive. Turn the problem into a positive goal. What can we do instead? Brainstorming ideas about what the solution might be. We'll talk a little bit about kind of options for solutions in a couple more slides. Breaking down the problem into smaller, more manageable parts. So first I need you to do this, then I need you to do this. The first step, of course, always is calming yourself. Kind of outlining for them what you're going to start with and then what they should do next, or even brainstorming with them. What could we do next? So the do's and don'ts box. So do offer opportunities to talk, assessing your child's frustration. You know them best. So kind of deciding, is he or she in a place right now where they can even hear me, where we can even talk about this? If the answer is no, then that's, again, where you need to start. Limiting your words when your child's having a difficult time. So, I see this a lot in classrooms, a child's having a difficult time with a transition or something, and the teacher is talking to them a lot. Well, what did you do? Well, did you ask him if you could use the toy? What other words could you use? And the child's just sitting there crying, and they're trying. The intent is there. I'm not even saying that, really in a negative way. That's a great intention, and at some point the child does need to talk about what choices they could have made, but that's not the moment. So in that moment when the child's just really having that meltdown, it's not the time to talk about what you should do next or what should be done. You really just have to regulate first. Helping your child think of ideas, so we'll talk about that in a minute. That's kind of more so if your child's on the younger age here, where they're not able to kind of generate those ideas on their own. Playing it out, role playing, acting it out. We've talked a lot about that in the previous lessons with cooperation and setting limits, communication, basically everything. So things to avoid. don't try to teach your child to solve problems when you are tired, rushed, or frustrated. So again, what we talked about last week, and with cooperation too, you need to be in a good, calm state as well. So that's only going to help them regulate. The more you can regulate yourself, and whatever that means for you, short term and long term. So short term regulation: are you taking breaths? Are you taking a moment and counting down and calming yourself in that moment of frustration? And then long-term ideas of how are you caring for yourself? What are you including in your life, whether that's every day or every week, in order to make sure that, in a bigger picture sense, that you are regulated. If you know that you need to exercise fairly regularly to feel regulated, and you're not doing that, it's probably affecting other relationships in your life. So kind of just thinking about that. What's my long-term way of regulating myself? Don't offer all the ideas. So we'll talk a little bit about brainstorming ideas in a minute, but letting your child come up with some ideas, and thinking about that in terms of setting limits too. So letting your child come up with some ideas and accepting them. Don't correct your child's ideas, even if it sounds crazy, which again we'll talk about in a minute. Even if it's something that's not an option, simply acknowledging it. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to end up being, what happens, but acknowledging that idea. I'll give you an example in a minute. And don't use a lot of words. So again, thinking about those simple phrases, thinking about ways that you can show it in another way instead of words. So some of the activity cards, again, they're kind of broken into these two steps of calming and regulating first, and then generating ideas of how to problem solve. So some of the ideas that were given in the cards, calming down the noodle. So imagining you're a noodle, flop down gently on a chair, on the floor. Maybe you could talk about being like a rag doll. I don't know, kids probably don't even know what a rag doll is anymore. You talk about being a cloud. You can talk about being an ocean wave. I mean, there's so many ways that you can, allow your child to kind of visualize something that is calming. So generating, again, this is if your child is at this level of language, so, a late 3 or 4 or 5-year-old. So just kind of giving an example, or taking a book from, I'll talk about the book list in a minute, but I think another great way is to watch a movie and talk about the characters. A lot of times, they're having problems in movies or cartoons or whatever it is your child's watching. So just kind of pointing out oh, it looks like Ivan is really mad because he wanted to go outside and play, but mom said no. What can he do to calm himself down? So, whether or not you're creating this scenario as part of a story or it's something that pops up in real life, and just having a conversation about allowing your child to generate those ideas of how they might calm themselves down. Again, more ideas of becoming a cloud, whether you want to be a cloud or a noodle or an ocean wave or whatever. That teddy bear is there just to kind of give an idea of some sort of object that's calming for your child. And another one that they use often in preschool classrooms is this: smell the flower, blow the candle. So, just picturing, you can teach these steps. I'm sure you could Google this, and there's probably a song about it. So smelling the flower, you're teaching them to inhale. They're kind of holding their flower, their imaginary flower, up to their nose, and then they're blowing out the candle, again, on the exhale. So it just is a kind of a visual and a fun way to talk about breathing. And there's tons of YouTube videos and ideas just by Googling, breathing techniques with kids, for example. There's also another way, an activity or a song called Tucker Turtle. I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure this is part of a larger curriculum, but there's, again, you can see on the right there's tons of videos about Tucker Turtle. This is one that I thought was pretty fairly comprehensive about the different steps involved. It's kind of silly, so feel free to laugh because she sings a song for you.
Tucker the turtle takes time to tuck and think about solutions. Tucker used to have trouble remembering how to play with his friends. Ouch! Tucker hit me and it hurt my nose. Tucker grabbed my toy. I think that he doesn't like me. Tucker was yelling and I couldn't hear the story. I don't have fun when I have to take time away from my friends. Now, Tucker the Turtle has learned how to take time to tuck and calm down. Tucker can remember how to think like a turtle. Step 1. Uh-oh, I'm frustrated. Step 2. Tucker stops. Step 3. Tucker tucks in his shell and takes 3 deep breaths. And step 4, I know, and he comes up with a solution. Then Tucker gets his solution suitcase to help him think of a better solution to his problem instead of hitting or yelling or running. Tucker just remembers to tuck, take slow, deep breaths, and then choose better solutions to his problems. Tucker even has a song to remind him what to do. Think like Tucker the Turtle. Think like Tucker the Turtle. Stop. Keep your hands to yourself. No yelling at your friends. Take 3 deep breaths. Can you sing along with me? Think like Tucker the Turtle. Think like Tucker the Turtle. Stop. Keep your hands to yourself. No yelling at your friends. Take 3 deep breaths. And you can practice this at school or at home.
Okay, I know you love that song. That song is really in my head after I hear it. But, again, that's just an example. If the song is like too much for you and you're thinking like, no way am I going to sing this, that's totally fine. You can think of other ways. But I really highly suggest you make it something fun and something kind of interactive like that your child's able to remember instead of the usual, conversation about rules that we have, that sometimes is not so easy for them to remember. And it's fun to tuck like a turtle. That's something they're learning really through that play to regulate themselves. So after the calming happens, so again, Tucker Turtle kind of goes through these different steps. He calms himself in his shell, and then he comes out and thinks of, with his solution suitcase, I love that, he comes out to try to generate solutions to this problem. So encouraging those ideas. Again, like that last example that we had of whether you're reading a story or something and you say, oh, this child's having a hard time doing this, how can he calm down? This same idea. So John has to clean up his toys before he can go outside to play. His room is a real mess and he wants to get it done as quickly as possible. Can you help John? Think of as many ideas as you can. As all ideas are good, even if they sound silly. So generating these ideas of what can he do. I think it's, again, a great way to do this within a story that you're reading. And then using that simple language. So this kind of gives a do and don't right here. So do say this. Let's figure out what you can say when you want some time with me. Instead of, you always start hanging on me and whining. That's really kind of this combination of focusing on what they're doing wrong instead of focusing on what is it that you want from them. I want you to have a way to show me that you need my attention, or to show me that you want some time with me. What can that way be? Instead of just, complaining maybe about what it is that they're doing. And then breaking it down into those steps and really explaining how it is you want them to solve the problem. So saying, first you can try to apologize to Mark, then try to think of things that both of you like to play, instead of, you need to try to be friends with Mark. So this it's kind of the same idea of, it's a very vague concept, be friends, be nice, be polite, have manners. Those are all very vague adult concepts, that we understand, but you really have to break it down for a child from 0 to 5. So what does it mean to be nice? What does that mean exactly? What does it mean to have manners? What exactly do you want from me? You want me to say please and thank you. You want me to keep my hands off the table. You need to be more specific about what those things are. So when you are able to sit and brainstorm with your child, again, this is a little bit easier the more language your child has. But I think sometimes you can even foster this if you have an older sibling and a younger child. So kind of modeling with the older child how to do this. So asking, how do we solve this problem? Whatever the problem is. I've noticed it's really hard for you to brush your teeth when I ask you to at night, for example. How can we solve this problem? What are some things that we can do? You can throw out a few ideas. I think this, I think that. And then kind of sit and wait for your child to give you an idea. Again, this is if they're of the age where they can communicate with you. Listen and encourage those ideas, and really truly asking them, I really want to know, what is it that you think could solve this problem? So you're building confidence, you're communicating, you're engaging with them. These are all great ways to regulate them, as well as to get some creative answers to this issue. Writing down the ideas that they give out, or drawing a picture, if you know that would be easier for them to kind of reference. Drawing a picture and saying, these are the steps 1, 2, 3 we talked about when we talked about brushing our teeth at night. We discussed this together, and I listened to your ideas. And don't take over that process. So again, you shouldn't be the only one directing them, because that's often what we're doing with kids, directing them and telling them what we want them to do, but really listening to what their ideas are. And again, like it said in the previous slide, even if those ideas are crazy and you're never going to do them. Like, for example, you're saying it's hard for you to give up your iPad, before we go to bed. We're always having this argument about the iPad. What do you think we could do to solve this? Let's say your child says, well, I just want to have the iPad all night long in my bed with me, and I'm going to watch TV all night long on my iPad. I want you to calmly say, okay, that's an option, and write it down or draw a picture. Just center yourself and take that deep breath and say, okay, that's an option. Now, is that going to be the option that you're going to go with? No, obviously not. That's not going to be the solution. But simply by showing your child that, again, you're listening to them, their idea is important, and you're considering it, you're far more likely to get compliance for what the real answer will be eventually, simply by writing that down instead of shooting it down and saying, no, obviously we're not going to do that. Just go with it. You will shock them, I promise. Another great way to kind of think about choosing those ways to solve problems is some charts and visuals. So these are just pulled off of Google Images. Spend a couple dollars and you can color print these, cut them out. And they're just great everyday kind of general solutions. These are, I'm sure, generated for a preschool classroom, but they could be used at home too. General solutions for what to do. So play with someone new, or ask your sibling if you can use the toy. Share with your sibling. Leave the situation. Please say stop. Say how you feel. Take turns. So these are kind of basic solutions to everyday problems that your preschooler age child is going to run into. And I think this is just a lot easier for them to use sometimes than constantly having asked to use their words. They can really point to this, or kind of, if you wanted to cut them out, like literally physically handle the piece and say, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to do to solve this problem. Another really quick video that I liked.
There are 3 types of thinking skills required for problem solving. Critical thinking. This refers to breaking down a problem into parts and analyzing each part one step at a time. Creative thinking. This refers to looking at a problem in several different ways. Total thinking. This refers to using both creative and critical thinking skills together. To boost critical thinking, go to the store with specific items on a shopping list. Allow your child to practice adding up the cost. Purposely give them a budget that will not allow for all items on the list, and ask them for help deciding how to proceed if it looks like the items will go over budget. To boost creative thinking, pause a TV show or movie at various times and ask kids what they think might happen next. When a character is faced with a problem, talk about the choices that the character could make to resolve the issue. To boost total thinking skills, tell your child to move one object from one side of the room to the other without touching the object with their hands. Kids will often use various body parts or other household items to move the object. Some children might use something to cover their hands, while others might ask someone else to simply move the object. For more ideas, check out ehow.com.
So I really like that quick video, just kind of a way of building those critical thinking skills. I think obviously some of those examples aren't applicable to a preschooler, like a shopping list. But, that's something you could use if you have an older child. Or, I think there's a lot of ways to kind of Google those critical thinking skills by building those, in your child from 0 to 5. That the last one that they showed of, taking an object and moving it across the room without using your hands. It may sound silly, but first of all, you're engaging your child in a form of play, which we know is the best way that they learn. And, they're having to think creatively about how to solve this problem. So you're really practicing problem-solving skills, even though it may look like you're just playing a game. It's really a way for them to kind of critically think about what they're going to do. So yesterday when we went over this, we had a lot more time. Now I'm kind of rounding up on my time here, but let's go back to checkup A in a minute. Let me go over the homework for this week, and then we'll go back to checkup A. So for this week in solving problems, again, connecting first. This is my broken record here. So really working on those skills. That's something consistently that you should be trying and doing over these last several weeks, and that's just going to help with everything else. So thinking about how you and your child, have been solving problems. What is it that goes on? What would you like to change about that? Is it a power struggle that's happening? Is your child having a meltdown? Do you feel like they are scared to think out of the box? Are they always looking to you for direction? And maybe that part of that is because you always are providing that direction. So, in an effort to kind of help them follow the rules, you in some way are kind of inhibiting their own creative thinking because you're constantly directing them. So maybe just realizing that and giving them a few more options of, how to do things on their own. Calming down first, both you and your child. We talked about the different ways to do that. Start with your own ideas or a visual chart. Again, if your child's younger, you can, of course, generate those ideas for them, or maybe an older sibling can help with that. Showing instead of talking. Really role-playing and allowing them to play through these things. Encouraging their ideas, not shooting them down, even when they're crazy. Acknowledging when things go well, giving opportunity when things didn't go so well. And always just keep working at it. This isn't going to happen overnight. This is definitely something that, requires your perseverance. And then next week is our last week. I can't believe it.